He's pretty new over there. It sounds like a pretty important vote.
That is fairly interesting.
Well, it probably indicates personality and drive as much as anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whip is, I'm not knocking the majority leader. The majority leader is sort of the policy guy. The whip is sort of the executive director. The whip's the one that's got to get out there and really work.
Try to get them to change their vote if they're going the wrong way and all that.
Well, he's got to work it. He's got to do the actual work. You know, it's kind of like having your president and your executive director. The president is I'm not saying they're all figureheads, but the executive director actually does a lot of the work. The whip is sort of that position. So it may, well, obviously it reflects Mark's a quick study, and he got over there and worked hard. And
oh, that's good. Congratulations.
That's good for us.
Make it. Yeah. Couple of local headlines that hit the news this week. City taking bids on the Summit redevelopment. I bet that got your attention, didn't it, John?
I'm glad they at least took bids.
Well, they haven't. They're in the process of it. But what got me about it is the city is currently eyeing plans to develop the current former hotel constructed in the late 20s on Inman Street. Possibly reviving the building as a boutique hotel featuring a mix of retail stores and restaurants on its ground floor. Now, I've heard that mentioned several times. So,
because it worked out so well for the Chattanoogan in Chattanooga.
So, obviously, that's what they're hoping that's going to happen.
Well, I think it's a perfect match. You got the county government going into business, competing against private enterprise, private business owners. Why shouldn't the city get a piece of that pie?
Well,
hell, let's just socialize everything and let the government own it all.
Franklin, say something this morning. You're awful quiet.
Well, there's been a lot going on with the city. It looks like they're moving ahead with the redevelopment plans where the old Hardwick stove factory is back there.
Something's going on. They tore a lot of stuff down.
Well, but there's a plan now that the Whirlpool is going to provide the land to the city. No, that's not bad. If they're going to utilize it to create this athletic park back there that was on that master redevelopment plan, Whirlpool will provide the land to them for it if it's being used for that purpose. The city has already applied for several grants that are available for that. They're optimistic about getting that, and so that would be a real shot in the arm for that side of the city to, I think, spur additional redevelopment around that area.
Well, so it's going to be a sports complex?
That's the understanding.
Who would be the people in the sports complex?
Well, it's tennis and basketball courts, and also green spaces with a lake on it.
You can do so much when you don't have to present a viable business plan to a bank.
Well,
when you don't have to actually show how something's going to pay for itself, you can just do all kinds of stuff with other people's money.
Well, the reason I'm asking these kind of questions is, I know Lee University had planned on going TSSAA.
Having a football team at some point.
Putting a football team. Is this sparking this?
No, I don't think it's related to that.
But as a surprise that Lee University is going to get involved?
But in the same way that Tinsley Park brought a lot of tourism into Bradley County, because you get a lot of softball tournaments and things like that, this is being done with the idea that it can create some opportunities of that sort also.
And we are actually going to get a curling ring, so we will have
a what?
The ice where you slide they're going to build an ice rink. That's one of the. I thought that was a joke. I thought I was making a ridiculous suggestion out, but apparently an ice rink is part of the idea. Because obviously the government sees something that every other competitive capitalist investor didn't see. Because if there was money to be made here, an investor would have done it, just like the hotel. Now it sits there and sits there and sits there.
There's more to it than that. The question is, does it make it a better place for people to do private reinvestment in the areas around this? That's one of the things that you'd be talking about there. There's a significant organization that's working over there in that area now trying to redevelop that part of the city, and that's something that may help them in that process. Not everything that a government does is supposed to generate a profit. Sometimes it's supposed to improve the community's lifestyle.
Okay. So I'm sure the people, just like the county's doing, if they do, the hotel, if it was a viable business model, a free enterprise entrepreneur would have done it.
Now, John, they're trying to show you that they have to show these developers.
No, what they're doing is they got a 28% tax increase. They're flush with money, and so by God, we can just do whatever we want to because we took a bunch of your money away from you.
Well, they're going to redevelop that ugly hotel, right?
Yeah. Right. Because, once again, same thing I fussed about with the Pie Center. So now city government is going to be in direct competition with private enterprise. Well, I mean, Franklin,
they're not talking about owning it. They're talking about selling it.
If it was a good business opportunity, someone would have bought the hotel originally.
Maybe there are some things with some investment the city can do that makes it more feasible for somebody else to do.
Yeah, that's actually, you're right.
And if that happens, it creates a major improvement for the downtown.
You're absolutely right. What they can do is they can, by force of government, reach into our pocket, get a bunch of money out, spend it, improving it, and then they can probably sell it to someone else. But Franklin, the point is government's not supposed to be in that business. John, they're not supposed to be reaching into our pocket because someone thinks that'd be a good hotel.
John, you would be so happy if you would just move out onto the prairie and be totally self-sufficient.
And accept socialism. Let me ask you a question, Franklin. Let's say in 2 years that site over there where Whirlpool was had sat and sat and sat. Mm-hmm. And Whirlpool wants to get rid of it, and Lee University decides that they're going to go into the football arena just like we talked about. Where would be a wonderful large block of land close to Lee University that they might be willing to purchase and build a football stadium? Right there.
Possibly.
And you know what? And that
not necessarily.
That wouldn't involve any taxpayer funds. That's the point. Government looks and goes, well, we really think we ought to do this. So let's just take a bunch more money from the public and let's spend it the way we want because we are so much smarter than those peons we represent.
And your view is the government should never do anything to make our city better.
Like they shouldn't be in direct competition with private
How
business.
is building a park back there a competition?
Well, actually, it is. There are in lots of cities, tennis courts, things like that are private. We've already got tennis courts. We don't have an ice rink. I didn't think we ever would have an ice rink, but we don't have an ice rink. I will give them that. And how did it work out for Chattanooga with the Chattanoogan? So you got a big city. You've got all kinds of attractions. You've got the Tennessee River. How did the Chattanoogan work out for the city government down there?
Talking about making a profit?
It failed. They had to dump it.
What did they do with it?
They had to dump it. They had to lost money. They had to dump it onto the market.
Except for all the stuff around it that got built because it was there, which was also a big improvement.
You know what, Franklin,
but you don't count that as a benefit.
No, here's the point. You're right. You know why you don't count it? Because they never count government investment. If this was a private enterprise, you would balance all of that, and you'd say, how much did the Chattanoogan cost? How much did it generate around it? On net, was it a plus or a minus? But the government isn't held to those kind of rules.
Lots of people would say it was a plus.
The government's never held to those kind of rules because it's free money.
Well, most of the time when these type of projects take place, to me, there's things that are hidden that they're not talking about. There's somebody there.
Well, it's like,
there's
let's
something
talk
happening.
about
They're trying to help somebody get started.
Well, but you know what? I've got an article here about that. That is the worst thing that happens in the world. And I'm going to say the liberals, but it's not always liberals, but it's the idea that we're going to help someone. We meant well. It didn't work out, but by golly, we sure did mean well, didn't we? Now, we destroyed all kinds of stuff all around us in our wake, but we meant well.
Well, there's going to be a bottom line here, John, and it's going to be the bottom line is going to be beautiful.
Let's discuss the bottom line of geothermal heating and cooling at Cleveland High School then. Because we were all told the same argument. Oh, it's wonderful. It's an investment. It's going to save us. It's going to do this. Well, what's it done? We've had to close school. I don't know how many days they were closed last week because the damn thing doesn't work. Hadn't worked from the beginning.
Well, it's probably the hottest day of the year, too.
Well, you know what? The schools without geothermal heating and cooling seem to run. Every damn one. Arnold School failing. Cleveland Middle School was failing. Cleveland High School's failing. But we were told geothermal heating and cooling, it's just, it's the most wonderful investment in the world. Now, you know what's funny about that? I made the same argument there. If it's a wonderful investment, private businesses would be putting geothermal heating and cooling in. Guess what? Private businesses weren't doing it because it didn't pay for itself and was a disaster in this part of the country.
Private people would be wanting more electric cars, too, wouldn't they?
If it was a good deal.
Hey, Franklin, good morning.
Good morning.
John's doing all the rattling this morning. Good morning, everyone. We've got John Stanberry online here.
I'll shut up.
Franklin, I'll tell you what. Let's change the scope of things. What would you like to talk about this morning?
What would I like to talk about?
Yeah.
I am curious. I'm going to start by asking John a question.
All right, good.
I'm curious what John's take is on the John Bolton resignation this week, whether it's good or bad.
I'm kind of torn.
I am too.
I like Bolton a lot.
I hate Bolton.
Well, I'm glad you said that because here's what's interesting about it. I think Franklin's probably going to be pretty straightforward and honest about this, but the national media is not. Most of them hated Bolton. Most of them were extremely critical when he brought Bolton on.
Oh, I know.
Those same people are now going, oh, my God, he let Bolton go. There's chaos, and without Bolton there.
I remember when they thought Bolton was the worst choice he could have possibly made.
Now look, I like Bolton. I'm torn a little bit. Here's the thing about President Trump, and it's interesting how the Democrats and the progressive left are reacting because he's two things. He's actually keeping a promise. He's doing something that a lot of people on the left and on our side outside of Rand Paul, mostly on the left, had wanted the country to do. He's pulling us out, and I'm not entirely for pulling out like that. I would have criticized President Obama if he'd pulled out like that. But having said that, when last night I looked at some of the polling is overwhelming that people don't like the Iraq War. They don't even like the Afghanistan war, and they don't want us in there anymore. He's doing what the public wants.
And what he said he was going to do. Well, evidently he and Bolton just didn't get along.
I'm not sure they agreed on anything.
Well,
which is why it was a strange choice to begin with.
That's what I like about Trump. He likes people
who agree with him.
No.
That's actually the criticism of this. It's that who's going to tell Donald Trump, I think you're wrong, Mr. President, which I think every president is.
Here's where I'm going. Donald Trump will listen to people. He listens to them. He wants to have...
they actually say inside, there are people that have left the White House said that he actually wants that. It's the problem he had with Bolton was once a decision was made, he doesn't think people ought to undermine it. He doesn't think they ought to continue. And you know what's interesting about this?
I think Bolton was just too strong-headed. He wasn't willing to bend any, and Donald Trump just... he didn't have the same.
Well, they do lock heads on that. Bolton was a big supporter of interventionists. He wants troops in Afghanistan. He wants troops in Iraq, and I lean that way as well. But the public doesn't want it, and the president ran on the idea that he wasn't going to do it.
I think it's accurate that there is no war that John Bolton wouldn't like.
Yeah.
Now, which really raises the question of why he was selected by the president to begin with.
Well, but there are actually, from what I understand, listening yesterday to Condoleezza Rice and there are several key areas where they agree. They agreed on, for example, oil prices tumbled yesterday when they announced Bolton was leaving because they're afraid that they will ease up on Iraq. Bolton was in pretty good agreement on the heavy, hard sanctions on Iraq. So there were a lot of areas that they did agree. I actually think this Taliban discussion probably was one of the biggest things that recently that they probably butted heads about. But another interesting thing about the way the media and the left in general has reacted to Trump, H.R. McMaster and all the people he put in at the very first, they were the adults in the room. And without them, Trump was going to just be crazy. Well, they're all gone, but foreign policy has stayed the same. These people have come and gone, but the foreign policy has stayed the same.
I think Trump has probably been more involved with foreign policy than any president I've ever. Well,
Mattis, for example,
anybody being this involved in foreign policy.
Andrea Mitchell on Sunday tried to get General Mattis to say that the NATO was actually weaker. Mattis slapped her down hard and said, absolutely not. He said, and this is a guy that obviously had disagreements with President Trump, but he said NATO is much stronger today than it has been in decades. And it said it's because they do need to be paying more. And they do need to be stepping up to the plate, and President Trump has brought that about. So, you can fuss about this or that, but foreign policy has actually been pretty steady, and right now it's in line with what the American public want.
Okay.
We finally got a rebuttal.
I still think it's a perfectly fair question to say that it seems that this president cannot work with virtually anybody at this point.
Let me say something. He has fired 12 people since he's been there. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Fired 12
in 3
people.
years.
Well, okay. Well, no. Let me tell you something. There's no use wasting your time with someone who's not going to be able to get to the finish line. And that's what Trump realizes. Most good entrepreneurs are not going to waste their time with people that won't be able to get to the finish line.
Well, let me say
but he's the one selecting them.
But here's the deal,
right.
Franklin. I'm going to agree with you.
That's okay.
I'm going to agree with you, but maybe twist it a little bit. He's the first non-politician businessman, big businessman like that we've had.
Well, I think it is true that he believes, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, not necessarily correctly. He believes this. I will say that Donald Trump does believe this. He believes if he can get in the room with anybody, he can bend them to his will.
I think you're right.
I think he's wrong about that.
Well,
he thinks that he can make Kim Jong-un a nice person.
Well,
he thinks he can get Vladimir Putin to do what he wants to do.
Well, let me ask you
something. But I don't think there's any evidence to support.
What has anybody else done to try to get to the bottom of
Franklin,
fixing anything that's wrong?
Not disagreeing with you, but Bush told us, I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw Obama leans over and says, I'll have more flexibility after the election. All of them think that. They're all egotistical. Anybody that wins the presidency is an egotist to begin with. It's just different natures of their personality, but they all think that.
I'll tell you something I think that Trump has behind him when he goes in and talks to someone. He's successful. He's not, he's got out in the real world and he's worked and he's seen what it takes.
Well,
most of these politicians had never done anything.
Let me disagree with I think the biggest thing he's got going for him is I think it has become perfectly clear, and Franklin probably will agree with this, that he makes the decision. And so these world leaders, there's no going around him. There's no talking to this underling. You got to make a deal with that one guy.
Right.
And in some ways, I think that's a positive.
I think that on the world stage right now, there is a view that he is not a reliable deal maker.
Well, Franklin, that's coming from someone who supported the Iran deal, which they were screwing us from day one on.
Well, how much
did it come from CNN? What did they say?
Well, actually, Franklin, for example, the China thing. Wall Street Journal had a report just the other day that we may be closer to ending this trade war with China than we think. Apparently, the internal pressures from the economy are much greater than the Chinese are reporting. They're having a lot of hog prices, for example, have gone up 40% in China in the last couple of months. And apparently hog is a high commodity over there.
That's also because they have a rash of a disease going through their hogs
but
right
my point is, Franklin, it's all
so there's a
piling
shortage.
Up. It's all piling up. You got Hong Kong going on. Hong Kong is shutting down, and whether that elicits
that has nothing to do with us. We're not doing that.
No, but the point is, Franklin, they're in a bind. And a good negotiator looks at that, and I'm sure President Trump has, and said, okay, they're already in a bind. Let me see how much harder I can put them in that bind.
What do you think he even talked about tariffs, Franklin?
I'm sorry, what now?
Why do you think Trump ever even talked about tariffs? There's nobody else politically that would talk about tariffs because it's not a good political thing. Trump's not afraid of it. What's he been able to accomplish with it so far? Anything?
Nothing that I've seen
Well,
yet.
destroyed ISIS, basically. They are
With tariffs?
effective-
That's the question he just
I
asked.
thought he said
Terrorists.
terrorists. I thought he said terrorists.
Pardon my
Yeah,
French.
we text
Sorry,
ISIS
I thought he
to
said terrorists. Okay.
Pardon my French.
Now that's a policy we could also.
Okay.
No, I think Donald Trump. I think he's brilliant.
Well,
I think he's on top of
Look,
everything. I think he understands
look. First
things
of all,
a little better
you know,
than most people.
he keeps saying they're paying the tariffs. They're not. We are.
No,
But Frank,
Number one.
no.
Number two.
We don't need anything
Number-
they got, Franklin.
number two.
We don't need anything they
Actually,
got.
we are transitioning to India. And that's one of the fears that China deals with. Well, let me say
When
this.
they
Franklin.
realize that, they're going to get in bed.
I'm not a huge tariff person, and you've had some people. There were a couple of liberals that were actually pretty honest about this. Just this week, I'm trying to think who it even was. One of the big Democrats actually Bernie Sanders, I think, said it. I'm not a huge fan of tariffs. But the fact of the matter is, we have been at war with China. Letting them in the World Trade Organization, which Bush did, was probably a mistake. You know, the idea was we're going to allow them to develop, and the development will lead to greater freedoms. It has not led to greater freedoms. They are an aggressive adversary on the world stage. And so I'm not sure, even though I don't like tariffs, I'm not sure you have any other alternatives. And so a lot of people look at this. There's a couple of politicians that have been honest enough to say, you know what, this is going to suck. It's going to hurt, but we've got to do it.
Let's take a break.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center, or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
Every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239 or go see him
Every Saturday.
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Inside the train testing facility, our heating and cooling products are put through 16 weeks of extreme temperature fluctuations to simulate 5 years of wear and tear. But these aren't just seasonal shifts. Inside the lab, it fluctuates between 150 degrees one day to sub-zero temperatures and layers of snow the next. Then back to hot, then back to cold. Then hot and cold. Hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. And we didn't even get through the first month. We test so it runs.
Looking for a heating and air unit that's been tested and then tested some more, then nothing will do but a train. And when you want the best in train service, there's only one place to turn. Mechanical Systems. With more than 30 years experience, Mechanical Systems is your local train comfort specialist, and they're ready to make your life more comfortable. Give them a call at 336-5739. That's Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. 336-5739. High quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a train.
Our friends at Economy Rentals say, it's fall and time for football, y'all. Economy Rentals, where we make it easy to own, Cleveland's oldest and family-owned rent-to-own store with everything you need, from appliances, furniture, electronics, TVs, and more. Speaking of TVs, since it's football time, how about a 65-inch 4K UHD smart TV, only $24.95 a week. That's right. Get yours for football now. And also, don't forget, we always have the 2 rooms of furniture for only $39.95 a week. A washer and dryer combo, only $21.95 a week. Hey, call them up, 472-6105, or go see them at 901 Sahara Drive. That's 472-6105 or 901 Sahara Drive, economyrentals.net, and on Facebook. And don't forget that big old 65-inch 4K UHD Smart TV, $24.95 a week. Don't forget, free delivery, 90 days, same as cash. Check them out. Woo, it's football time. Attention, Cleveland area creditors. Are you tired of dealing with debtors that owe you money? I'm Jeff Renfro, and I've owned and operated Financial Recovery, a debt recovery specialist here in my hometown of Cleveland for 18 years. We're a licensed and bonded Tennessee collection agency working for a wide variety of creditors, from commercial, manufacturing, physicians, dentists, attorneys, small business owners, to individuals. Look, any kind of business dealing with billing, charge accounts, or even return checks. I know your past due accounts are not a top priority for you, but they would be to me. Let me try to make it easy for you to make a change in the way you've been handling your accounts. There's no contract and no cost to you in most cases, as our fee of only 30% can be added to the balance owed to you. So, whether you have hundreds of accounts monthly and need help with your billing and collection, or you're just an individual and somebody owes you money, let me help you. Give me a call at 400-5376 and I'll come by and see you. That's 400-5376.
Financial Recovery, a licensed and bonded collection agency in Cleveland, Tennessee, 400-5376.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back live.
Independent. That's what it is.
All right. Ron, you wanted to talk about some judge I hadn't heard about.
Yeah, I mean, it's there was an immigration order in the summer. This judge struck it down and issued a nationwide injunction. And look, Franklin can say he doesn't believe me, but I wouldn't have agreed with this if it was the Obama administration. I don't think these judges should have the right in one area to issue a nationwide injunction, or at least not except in maybe very rare cases. So I don't like the whole concept, no matter who the president is. But having said that, he issued it. The Ninth Circuit Court, which is probably the most liberal court in the country, struck him down. Well, he just turned around and put it back on. And basically, he flipped off his own Ninth Circuit Court.
Without getting too far into the specifics of this, because I can't say I'm familiar enough with it, but generally speaking, an injunction can be issued when somebody finds, or a judge finds, that there's a risk of irreparable harm if the injunction is not granted while the case goes to a trial. That's the purpose of the injunction. It's not a permanent ruling. It's a temporary ruling till there can be a hearing, if you can demonstrate that the harm would be overwhelming at that point. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not saying that, but that's the legal standard that you're talking about.
All right, so
and understand, you say a judge shouldn't be able to do that nationwide. Well, the party on the other side of the case is the United States government. So you can't really issue an injunction that only applies to the district that you work in when it's the United States government that's the party.
The problem here, Franklin, is when the Ninth Circuit Court, the most liberal circuit court in the nation, when this is their wording, said that they had not presented enough evidence to warrant a nationwide injunction.
Okay. And so
And
the
then he
question
turned
is,
back.
when he came back down there, did they?
He said, this is this judge, he said he interpreted the Ninth Circuit's court ruling to mean he was free to reimpose the nationwide injunction if there was evidence to warrant it. And because some of the organizations have clients outside of the Ninth Circuit, he said only a nationwide injunction would supply the relief which they were entitled, which means they didn't present any more evidence. He just flipped off the Ninth Circuit court.
Well,
and the problem here,
the
Franklin,
Ninth Circuit can deal with that.
And
apparently are willing to do that.
I'm going to say it again. I would have defended Obama in this case. Immigration, foreign policy, that is exclusively in the hands of the president. And for a single judge to basically say, I don't like what the president did, so I'm going to stop it. That guy's not elected. He's not representative of the people. He doesn't answer to anybody in re-elections. I think that's wrong. I don't think they have any business doing it, and I would have said they don't have any business doing it in Obama's term.
Well, they sure think they do.
Well, you know, that's why these judges that Donald Trump has been appointing has got the left so apoplectic. They have successfully, over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, implemented policies without having to put it through the Congress because the will of the people didn't agree with them.
The reason Democrats are so apoplectic is because Republicans went to such extremes to stop the previous administrations from exercising their right.
Franklin. It's called the government.
Then so is Democrats trying to stop something.
I'm not arguing with them trying to stop it. You're just upset because you've lost.
Well,
because you haven't stopped it.
Okay.
But my point is, Franklin.
The point is, John, what you're saying is anything goes.
We never used to play that. No, we did. Listen to me. I'm not talking about the game you're talking about. I'm talking about the idea that if I can't get something passed through Congress, I go to a judge and I get the judge to implement it. That's the game.
That's exactly what you're going to do.
Well, yeah, we had to do it.
That's exactly what happened with. That's exactly what you tried to do with Obamacare.
I'll give you a
exactly that.
You're right, because we learned after the last 50 years of you all doing it. Now, I don't like it. I'll be honest with you, Franklin. Here's the reason I don't like it. Gay marriage, for example. Gay marriage was moving through the states, was probably going to be successful in most of the states. It would be different because we're a federal form of government, so each state might be a little different. But you know what you would have had it been allowed to finish its movement that way? You would have had much more peace about the issue. Because the public, each state would have said, okay, we elected these guys and women, and they did what they did, and so we can live with that. Same thing with Roe versus Wade. Abortion would have been settled on a state-by-state basis, but the point was, from the public standpoint, you would have had calm. What you had instead was you had a bunch of unelected judges cram it down everyone's throat, and that's why you have the unrest and the division that you have now, because it wasn't allowed to go through the normal legislative process. So I don't like the whole idea of judges legislating from the bench. Either way. But you're right, Franklin. You all did it for 50 years. You crammed all kinds of things down our throats, and the Republicans finally said, you know what? If that's the way the game's going to be played, that's the way we'll have to play it.
There is a America's first black billionaire. He thinks the way I do, I believe. And he says that the Dems are moving too far left. Robert Johnson, founder of the Black Entertainment Television, BET, the America's first black billionaire, praised Donald Trump for a roaring economy, criticized the Democrats for moving too far left. He goes on to say, the party, in my opinion, for me personally, has moved too far to the left. Johnson told CNBC's Haley Gamble, and for that reason, I don't have a particular candidate I'm supporting in the party at this time. I think at the end of the day, if a Democrat is going to beat Trump, then that person, he or she, will have to move to the center, and you can't wait too long to do that. I thought that was a pretty good endorsement for Trump right there from BET.
Well, it didn't sound like he was endorsing the president to me.
It sounded to me like he didn't have any options.
Is that there's not going to be any other option. One of the problems, Franklin, is in the past, both sides have been able to say things to their base in a way that allowed some flexibility to move back to the center. Sure. Y'all don't have any flexibility anymore. I mean, Biden just this last week actually said, I'm going to end all fossil fuels. There's no way back from that, Franklin. By the way, fossil fuels are 82% of all our energy production. I mean, if we ended all fossil fuels, we basically will go back to an agrarian economy.
Here's a little article that says Americans won't pay your carbon taxes. And it says, but the Democrats may be getting overconfident. At last week's climate town hall on CNN, Senator Warren, former Vice President Joe Biden, and South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, or whatever his name is, all endorsed a carbon tax. Kamala Harris did also, but she called hers a tax.
You know, that was a Republican idea, right?
What?
Carbon taxes.
It's a bad idea either way.
It basically, it's creating a market that people can buy and sell these tax credits that you get,
all right,
and use that to finance transitions to other types of energy. That was an idea that was originated under the Reagan administration.
7 hours of climate on CNN. So let me just a quick list. Ban all commercial air travel except for the ruling and privileged classes. Change our dietary...
Oh, yes, that's what they said.
Well, it will be, Franklin.
No, it's not what they... You see, you're implying that they said that.
Example, Franklin.
Oh, 7 hours on CNN.
He's reading.
Say something that nobody said. Not one person said that.
He's reading
from... One person said what he just said. She just made that up.
Change our dietary guidelines and ban beef outright.
They all said that too.
Massively increase taxes to make polluters pay. This is quotes. Make polluters pay for emitting greenhouse gases. Eliminate offshore drilling and fracking, coal-fired plants, internal combustion engines, no pipelines, no nuclear plants, and to ensure climate justice.
Yep.
Now, Franklin...
And your approach to dealing with climate issues is what?
Well, let me give you your...
You have one.
Hang on a minute. Yes, I think we're doing great. I think that natural gas has been an incredible boon, most of which came from fracking.
I didn't say if it's making a profit.
People
Nobody
will
said that.
If you shut fracking down, you'll shut natural
gas down.
That
wasn't the question, John. You didn't answer the question.
What question? I said I think we're fine as we are. I don't think we need any of this crap.
You don't believe
we don't need any of this crap. Let me give you how this will work. Ethanol. Now they want to switch to ethanol off of gas. So U.S. ethanol currently gobbles up 40% of America's corn. It requires water, pesticides, fertilizers, gasoline, and diesel to produce and transport, which that'll be a problem to transport it. But if you replaced 100% of the gasoline with ethanol, it would require 360 million acres of corn. That's 7 times the land mass of the state of Utah. And if you actually did away with all of the oil that's used in pharmaceuticals, producing wind turbine blades, producing solar panel films, because you have to use it to produce these alternatives, that would mean 14 times the area of Utah would have to be planted in corn. If we generate 3.9 billion megawatts, which is what we used in 2018, and we did it with solar panels, you would blanket over 10 million acres of solar panels. That's half of South Carolina. And that's all kinds of wildlife and scenic land. And that's only, you get electricity only when the sun is shining. So if you do wind power, the turbines kill raptors and birds and bats every year. More than 1 million every year currently in these wind turbines are killed. Plus, the flicker and the noise that they make actually impair human health. But if you got rid of those, you would have, instead of 58,000 turbines, which we now have, we would need 14 million turbines, 400 feet tall, each one producing 1.8 megawatts when the wind is blowing at the proper speed. So if you assume
John, take a breath. You're drowning yourself in numbers.
No, Franklin. If you assume you take 15 acres apiece, they would require 225 million acres. That's well over twice the size of the state of California. Your people are crazy, Franklin. You can't do what they're saying they want to do.
Let me intervene here. Neither President Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton endorsed a carbon tax. A memo for the Clinton campaign estimated that a carbon tax of $42 per ton on greenhouse gas emissions would raise the annual energy cost by $478 for the average household and by $268 for the poorest fifth of the households. So I don't know how they're going to win an election when they're all pushing for this.
And by the way, Bernie Sanders effectively endorsed eugenics in that. He effectively endorsed eugenics in that debate. He said, if we go to these poor countries in Africa, which are blacks, then we can enforce population control to keep the population down.
Yeah,
that's eugenics.
When is the next Democratic debate?
Tomorrow night, I think.
Tomorrow night. You think they'll ask? ABC's putting this one on, right?
I don't know who's doing this one.
ABC's asking the questions, and some of the people are talking about the questions that should be asked. Right now, they haven't really gotten down to any.
In the CNN climate thing, not a single question was asked about how are you going to pay for that? What's it going to do to the economy? In 7 hours, no one was actually asked to explain how it was going to be paid for.
They need to ask some closed-end questions instead of all these open-end questions that they do for these candidates.
Well, most of those involve questions that were submitted by viewers during that also.
By the way, Biden grabbed one woman's hand without permission, and she's fussed.
Oh, really?
Look,
I love this.
I know, but here,
John's going to.
No, Franklin, I'm actually going to defend both sides. On the one hand, as a candidate, he should have had enough sense with the issues floating around him not to grab someone's hand. On the other hand, really grabbing your hand is triggering? Give me a break.
Yeah. The Democrats do admit that Trump helped the GOP candidate sweep North Carolina special election. What do you think, Franklin?
Well, I would say that a presidential rally in a congressman's district before a special election would probably be helpful.
It did.
Typically.
Bishop was down 17 points 3 weeks ago, and he won. Now,
Democrats spent $20 million.
On the other hand, the Republicans have held that seat for 25 years.
Right,
6 years.
But here's the thing, a special election, which almost always favors the left, to be perfectly honest, they overspent.
Why is that? What does that mean?
Because right now you all are so motivated by your hatred.
Yeah.
So it turns out, Franklin, McCready overspent Bishop incredibly. The Democrats spent a whole lot more money. But here's the really kind of thing that ought to worry the Democrats. So Bishop won Robeson County. So Robeson County was an Obama county that switched to Trump. The last election, McCready won that by 15%. It nearly flipped tonight. He went from 56.4% of Robeson County just last year to 50.3%. Now, he still won, but he just barely won, and he dropped a significant percentage. That indicates the direction that county's going. By the way, that has a large Indian population on that, and that flipped. They moved heavily towards the GOP.
Good. I think people are starting to wake up. I'd said a long time ago, a Hickson prediction, that the Democrats will be the ones that end up electing Donald Trump the next term. There's not, half these Democrats are not going to go as far left, just like this guy with BET. They've gone too far left. There's nothing left for them to talk about.
Let me bring up something that I think we could discuss apolitically, and your mention of the BET guy made me think about it. Kylie Jenner is the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. Supposedly, the joke is all the other Kardashians aggravate her about being richer than they are. She's a billionaire, 22 years old, cosmetic firm.
Yeah.
Now, there's argument about that. The cosmetic firm's worth $1 billion. She owns it.
Whatever. She's worth a lot of money.
22 years old. And you know what? What's really, I guess I will be political about this. You listen to the Democrats, Beto O'Rourke especially, we're the worst country in the world. He gave a speech where we were racist from 1619. We're horrible. We're the reason for it. A 22-year-old girl. Now, she had advantages. Don't get me wrong. She had assets and advantages. But she took an idea and became a billionaire by the time she's 22. That doesn't happen in any other country in the world. It only happens here.
Well, that's not true.
Franklin, come on.
Well, I was not disagreeing with you until you said something that's just demonstrably not true.
All right. So, yes, has it technically happened in other countries? It happens all the time here. The BET guy, from nothing to a billionaire.
Okay.
It only happens with frequency in the United States. And by the way, all those other countries that it happens in, they only happen because of the American example. Because up until our revolution and Adam Smith and going with actual marketplace, the equality in the rest of the world was suffering and misery and poor. That was the equality.
This is going to sound racist, and I'm not trying to be racist, but I'm trying to figure out why black entertainment television even exists. Why do we have black entertainment?
Because there was practically no programming on network television that was focused on issues that African Americans deal with in their lives. That's why. There was a market for it.
I think the point, I don't disagree with what you said, Franklin, but the point is, could we at this point tolerate a white entertainment network?
No.
We have white entertainment all the time. That's the point. That's the reason there was a black entertainment television. Because we already had all that.
Franklin, let me make you a point here that gets lost in all of this. If you're an advertiser, you look at your population. Well, first off, if you're making, for example, hair care products that aren't useful on white people's hair versus black people's hair, which are different. The hair follicles are different. Everything about it's different. Then you're probably not going to run an ad. If you're making a product that works on black people's hair, you don't really want to waste your money running an ad for white audiences.
Okay.
And vice versa. So blacks are 13% of the population. You would expect to on average, have about 13% of the attention supplied. Now, BET supplies 100%. They're a niche market, and that's great. He looked and saw a market there. But there are some problems, for example, with Black Miss America. Are we going to have a Hispanic Miss America? Are we going to have an Asian Miss America? Or can't we at this point go, let's have a Miss America and not care whether she ends up black or white or Hispanic?
It's like in Chattanooga, they have a black chamber of commerce and a white chamber of commerce.
John,
that's racial to me.
Well, maybe one of them's not doing things that help.
Then fuss at that organization and make them change.
John, what'd you make of all these articles that appeared in conservative media over the last week or so, talking about, unfortunately, the number of white supremacists and so forth that have adopted the Republican Party? Ross Duhat and the guy in the Washington Examiner, conservatives, not liberals, who said it's time for the GOP to acknowledge that this is a problem they have.
Well, Franklin,
what do you make of that?
Well, first off, I'll say that.
You think it's anything like the liberal problem you have?
Well, you all have. Here's my problem with that. My problem with that is visibility, Franklin. You all have exactly the same problem with Antifa, for example, but no one holds you accountable for it.
I will tell you. Except that, I disagree with Antifa's methods. Their goal is against white supremacists.
No, it's not, Franklin. They're a bunch of fascists who they're anti-American, they're anti-anybody.
They wear masks, Franklin.
They wear masks and hide their identity. But here's my point, Franklin. The Tennessee Republican Party, and I was on the state executive committee when we did this, we had an open racist put in, because what you do is you say, I'm going to run as a Republican, you get your 25 signatures or your 100 signatures, and you're on the ballot. So he's an open racist in West Tennessee. Tennessee State Republican Executive Committee voted not to allow him to run as a Republican. We shut him off the ballot. So we deal with that as we can, Franklin. They don't run on our ballot, but we're a free country, and so we can't go in and say, you don't have the right to say, I'm going to vote for the Republican. Just like all the crazy communists you don't have a right to tell them they can't announce that they're for Bernie Sanders.
Well, we come to the end of our time, and I will say, just like Donald Trump said in his little speech last night, a vote for a Democrat is a vote for radical socialism right now.
Radical.
Let me throw out a gun control thing before we leave. The Odessa shooting,
Yeah.
he bought his gun from a guy who was building the ARs in his home and selling them, all of which is illegal. You can build one in your home for personal use. You can't build them to sell. But my point is he was building them in his home. That's where the Odessa guy had mental health issues. They blocked him from buying them through the background check, which is currently in place, and he bought one from a guy who was building in his house. Also, you can now 3D print a Glock magazine, fully out of plastic.
Should the law have permitted a prosecution of the guy who sold it to him?
Yes, they're going after the guy, frankly. But my point is, you're not going to shut any of this down. You are targeting laws that will only affect people like me, law-abiding citizens. By the way, gun sales skyrocketed in the month of August.
I know.
And I was part of that.
I know, John, because in your case, if you don't get to the magic number of 150, your constitutional rights will be trampled on.
Oh, Franklin, look, the issue here is people and the little monsters that our culture and our society is creating. If we, the gun people would agree with you all on that. So if we could start targeting that, by the way, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas case, that is a case of the government actually, to be honest, made that happen. And that goes directly to the Obama administration. The director of the schools down there was a protege of Arnie Duncan in Chicago. Obama actually helped get him in that position. He then started implementing these. They were talking about the school to prison pipeline, and so they put all these policies in place that downplayed any kind of arrest. They didn't want anybody arrested. And that's how that boy slipped through everyone's fingers.
Johnny Isaacson, the senator from Georgia, said this week, doing nothing is not an acceptable option.
I don't disagree, but it's what you do.
Pat Toomey, the Republican senator from Pennsylvania, has put forth legislation to that effect and is co-sponsoring it with a Democrat.
And it probably will pass.
If it ever comes up for a vote.
But frankly,
there's no indication yet that our esteemed Mitch McConnell will allow it to come up for a vote.
And his argument is, why would I allow anything to come up for a vote that the president's not going to sign? But frankly, my point to you is, if you all really wanted to
because
tackle
the
this,
legislative branch is a separate and co-equal branch and has its job to do, and let the president do his.
But there's no reason to waste time on something that's not going anywhere. You got lots of other things you need to do.
Depending on the vote, it might go somewhere.
Franklin, if you all could quit focusing on inanimate objects, you would find agreement with us to try and deal with the crazies.
Let me say this real quick before we go. What is this impeachment proceedings going to be about this week? They're starting the impeachment proceedings. What are they going to impeach him over? What are they trying to impeach
I don't know that they're going to.
Well, they keep talking about it. Why are they
The latest thing was that he's a racist.
I mean, this is absolutely crazy, Franklin. Why don't you give somebody a phone call in Washington and tell them to get real?
Yeah, Franklin.
Yeah, Franklin, get this done. This party's going left, too far left.
I'll do that as soon as the president stops ripping off the American taxpayer.
Woo! Lordy. People are going to his hotels.
That's the Air Force.
He's got hotels all over the world.
By the way, the Air Force, they followed the exact procedure. They were the low bidder that night. They had a procedure they follow, and that's how they ended up there. And they were actually cheaper than the Marriott.
Yeah.
Here we go. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.